maybe that's going down to the local canoe club. We've got business away from and personal away from. Begin to make sense? It's a nice way of positioning very, very quickly a huge amount of information about your offering. The offering's here, the buyer's here. Now, let's take we're going to make a more complex one. Here we've changed the offering. So this is now to technology sales team. Typically I will do a 4 or 5 day, very intensive, and often 2 weeks with some coaching stuff on the end session. And the offering is a whole thing called fearless selling. So it's a big product, but it's complex. And because it's complex, it delivers a hell of a lot more. And they're getting a lot of more techniques. Each one of these has a feature behind it, and I've done a so what analysis on those features, and I've got through to some different takeaways. Now some of these are repeated, which is why it looks like there's so many more. Okay, make sense? Now, what am I going to do with that chart? Somebody please tell me, make me believe I've just not wasted 3 hours. What am I going to do with those takeaways that are on that chart?
You can identify which type of customer you're talking to and use each quadrant to appeal to that customer.
And how am I going to do that?
You're going to ask them questions to find out.
You go. This is the basis for your engagement with the customer, not the features and functions of your product, not fantastic testimonials from your previous customers, not videos of how it's done. Those have all got a place, and in the bigger picture, and again read the book, you see the bigger picture, you can use those. But the fundamental thing is that's what's in your mind, because I'm a sailor, and if you look, imagine this is a lake, and each of these cubes is a buoy, a buoy, whatever you call it in Canada. What do you call it, a buoy, or to me it's a boy, right? Not a girl. Now, when I'm in my yacht, I can take any route I want. I can go and visit each buoy, each mark around the lake in whatever order I want. As long as I go to each one and put a little cross, I can pass the competition. That's really the way I look upon this takeaway analysis. If the customer wants to spend a lot of time over here talking about these particular takeaways, go for it. But you've jolly well got to go and visit those to make quite sure they have no need for them. Does that make sense as an analogy? So you've got this bunch of takeaways, probably less than this, probably 4, 5, 6 fundamental reasons for buying this stuff. And you've got to visit them all. Now, some of you have got very, very clear understanding of your buying drivers. I can see, because you wouldn't be here otherwise. And you get them quickly. Those are useful, but here's the trick. So have your competitors got different ones. That's where the minor ones come. The ones that you didn't think were very important, that you never really mentioned. But if you can be sitting there talking to your customer and he says, well, actually for me the biggest thing is I can see my kids on a Friday night. Well, that's great, that's exactly what you get with us. I mean, it's a hokey example, but if your competitors have not got that capability, or your competitors have not found out those other little takeaways, you're in a battle. It's a tough world out there. I don't often say I'm 60 years old, but I am. And I have sold shit for a lot of my life. And I wish sometimes I'd known about those little ones over there much earlier in the process. Because when you're in a battle with your 3 against his 3, it's really hard. But if you can differentiate yourself with these other little takeaways, or create them, that's the thing, you can create different takeaways. Maybe by changing the way you do your training, your partnership, your backup, your web services, whatever it is. Make sense? I'm sorry, I'm on my high horse there. I hope is this all right, Catherine? Do you mind me preaching to them?
It's a session.
So that's what the top quadrant's about. Offering to buyer, blah, blah, blah. Frame of reference, we've done that. Remember we talked about offering, there's the buyer. This is a blank. I hope we've got some blanks, have we?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to have time to do these now, because I want to do the ROI. But these are blanks which I've set up, and there's a whole load more. I'll get Catherine to email you these so you can put them up and put your own company on there. But it's jolly useful. We seem to have got a repeat there. Remember Willie Ross? Every sales call should just be a good opportunity to have a first-rate discussion about their business with a Glaswegian accent, all right? And that's what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to deliver some skills to do that. So let's have a look at the final bit that we're going to do today. So this is the last run in. It's a bit that most people forget to do. Turning a desire to buy into an order almost always comes down to money. Oh my God, look, he's put the wrong presentation on there. I'm sorry about this. I've used this before for somebody else. It's not important. What's the first phase of the commit? Anybody remember? I've said it a couple of times. Build a willing buyer. Okay, so somebody wants to buy your stuff, but we know that that's not enough. And the difference is the money. So now you've got, or you will have, a beautiful set of takeaways. 5, 6, 7, 8. And once you get to more than 10, you should be thinking, is this too complex? Is there just too much going on here? You know, can I collapse these down? Because 10, in my experience, is getting to be quite a lot of reasons to buy your stuff. Maybe you should be cutting down. Maybe if you're trying to sell your services to every single person in Canada, and you've spent 3 days doing an analysis, you'll get 10 takeaways. Or maybe you shouldn't be selling to every single person in Canada. Maybe it's just Eastern Ontario, or people from a particular demographic. Because then you're going to get an identifiable set of takeaways. Make sense? Okay, so I've got those takeaways. I need to analyse each of those takeaways for their financial value. Really important, because it's the financial value that turns the desire to buy into a decision to purchase. And that's what Catherine and I are going to do in the last sketch in about 10, 15 minutes. Which hopefully will make you laugh. Hopefully because of the sketch rather than what we do. But here's what we're going to do between now and then. I'm going to show you a really simple technique, and I want you to try it on one of your offerings that you've always found difficult to cost justify. Okay? So have a think about one of your offerings, or one part of your offering that's hard to cost justify. And then what we'll do is we'll take it through to a takeaway, and then we'll run the analysis. Now, when you do a financial cost justification, return on investment, whatever you call it, it basically comes down to one of two things. What are the two ways you can create a financial justification? Cost and income. Money in, money out, balance sheet, profit and loss. Okay? And when you look at any particular takeaway, you're either going to be reducing the amount of money that's going out, or increasing the amount of money that's going in. What do you do if time's involved? Anybody heard of NPV, net present value? Anybody not heard of NPV? I haven't, let's talk to me. Right, net present value is how we put a value onto time. So if I get $5 million today, I get $10 million in 5 years' time, which is better?
Yeah.
We don't know, do we? We have to work it out. Sorry? Yeah, that's for different reasons. That may be an S reason. I'd much rather have 5 today. You can take the $10 million and say, actually, if I'd got the $5 million and I'd invested it, what would it be worth in 10 years' time? So the net present value of the $10 million might be 7 today. The net present value of $10 million might be 4 today. And in which case the 4 is less, so I stick with the 5. Do you see my point? So net present value, for those of you who know it, is an obvious way of taking something where something further downstream is going to come in earlier back to a base amount. Because there's going to be a day they sign an order. There's going to be a day when it hits their bottom line. And that's the point at which you need to do the NPV. Your customers will not be doing it. 90% of your customers won't be doing it as well as this. You should be able to do your ROI more efficiently, more effectively, more objectively than your customers, and you'll be ahead of them, and you will have no problem. Because then when they come and say, well, but what about the cost of so-and-so? Well, let me help you. Here's a spreadsheet. And out of this work that we're going to spend just 5-10 minutes doing, you fundamentally need to put together what I call an ROI framework. An ROI framework shows the inputs, which is the cost of buying your stuff, your professional services, the funding that your banker who sat behind you, the benefits that they're going to get from that. So that's the inputs to it. And the outputs will be expense reductions or increases in income. If it's time, then you need to do the net present value. And you can kind of blag that a little bit, but there's going to be a net present value. What do we do about risk? Remember we talked about how we value risk? How do we value risk? Didn't give you the answer. It's a long day. Ask the customer. All right? You can maybe come up with a guess and say, well, look, in my experience, this is the sort of value that people put on risk. What would it be for you? But I would always lead by saying, how do you value risk in your company? How does the risk of a non-delivery, how do you value that? And if the person comes back and says, we have so few late deliveries, it doesn't even come into my thinking, don't think about risk anymore. But if the risk of late delivery is, I know exactly how much that costs, he says, we get hit with the cost of, we get hit with fines, we get hit with lost business, I've got it really well tied down. Oh, that's useful, you can put that into your spreadsheet. Make sense? So, we're going to take each of the takeaways and we're going to turn them into an income or an expense. So how the hell do we do that? We could sit down with a spreadsheet, but I've got a little tool. You can ignore this tool if you want, but I've found it very useful for with a lot of people. Whoops, what's happening here? Mr. Cartesian, you've heard of Cartesian analysis and stuff, he came up with this wonderful way of resolving complex problems. So what would happen to the money that was coming in if you did buy my offering and get my takeaway? So what would happen if you did do something? Can somebody give me a takeaway that's got a financial benefit associated with it that you've generated? Assuming you generated some takeaways?
Yeah, we got one there are less breakdowns in machinery. So
Okay, so what would happen if there was less breakdowns in machinery? And so what would happen if you did buy your offering and there were less breakdowns? What would happen financially?
you would make more money because your machines would be on for longer.
Oh, I love it. So that's the income side. That's really nice because whichever one you said, most people start with expense. Okay? So you see how in this case there's an expense and an income. You went straight to income, therefore your machines are generating revenue. So with that one question, what would happen if you did buy my offering and machines break down less? I would continue to make more income. And then we can do a what else? And we can really blow that one down. But then we can ask another question. What would happen if you didn't buy my offering? Okay? In that case, you'd have the expense, or whatever it was, you'd have less income. So sometimes it's the opposite, but sometimes it drives out new expense and income and feelings that are going on. Plus it could bring out more state. So these are very powerful questions. But then we can start going across here to the other side and say, what wouldn't happen if I bought your product? So I bought your product, what else? Maybe what wouldn't happen if I bought your product? Can you think of anything? Is there anything that your product prevents happening?
Yeah, breakdowns.
Okay, but so what wouldn't happen if I bought your product and I didn't have the breakdowns?
You wouldn't have to hire somebody to repair them.
Lovely, you see? Immediately we've got a variation on it. This is all meant to blow stuff out in an objective way. So you've blown out another cost benefit there. And then we have the one that blows everybody's mind. What wouldn't happen if you didn't? Can you come up with that? I think you've got a good understanding. So what wouldn't happen if I didn't buy your offering and reduce my breakdowns?
You would get the breakdowns.
That's nice. That's very Cartesian. You should be a debater. But yeah, okay. There's things that would happen. This often blows out answers where you don't expect them. But these are the 4 questions. You ask these 4 questions twice. One with income. So what would happen to your income if you did buy my stuff? What wouldn't happen to your income if you did buy my stuff? What would happen if you didn't buy my stuff, etc. Then you do it with expense. Does that make sense? I know it looks crazy, but remember we've got so few takeaways. We're down to 5, 6 or 7 takeaways. If you have too many takeaways, then pull down your buyer market or slightly reduce your offering. So what I want you all to do is just once, because I think that's all we've got time to do now, is pick an offering, do a so what analysis until you get to a takeaway. Don't be too clever. Take your time, because the last exercise we're going to do. Find an offering, make a statement about it. Then do the takeaway analysis until you get to a takeaway. Then try without your heads exploding to do that. One of you does answer these questions to do with income, the other one does it with expense. Make sense? I'm not going to blow any horns. Go. Do you want to go and work down there so that we've got a pair?
What about you? So what would
I'll be like the seller. So what you can simply get.
Okay, so I'll tell you a feature.
How many times do you think they
most
sell
often.
someone they receive?
Well, I want to pick
What
up
do you think this price value
difficult feature to justify in my opinion is
like it would be?
it's pretty good, it probably increased productivity.
better user interface. Right? It's not
But I was trying to speak to
Yeah.
very poorly is that.
Just nice to use. Okay, so we said
Do you
feature
think
is
there's a little different?
our interface is nice and easy to use.
you think they would
So what?
tell your friends, look, we get 50
So,
So what would you value that word about advertising?
I don't know, what do you want me to say on that one?
Well,
What would be?
I'm not trying to stop what you're doing, but sometimes it really does help if the other person's doing so what. Doing so what yourself seems to slow your brain down. I've done this a million times. Sewing whatting yourself, and even if the other person has never done any training, it's a kid from next door, and you get them to come in and say so what. It makes your brain is in a different place when you're saying so what to when you're answering a question.
Okay.
It's simple neurology, and it's amazing.
So you have to ask.
It'll promote your business, it'll promote the business.
So all UI is
It'll
better
promote
and
it.
easy to use.
it'll make you again. So it's just like that advertising benefit slash.
You have less
I think
errors.
it's clever and surprising. So that it's a matter of you being less and surprising.
Yeah, you make less mistakes when you do it.
I can often, like what I did, I just like imagine the end takeaways. So in the case it's just been there. Now it's like go back and like try to figure out how to like make it happen because I can see that for the sales launch,
Less mistakes.
advertising is a big expense. Like